You're tuned in to Aquarium Drunkard Transmissions. I'm Jason P. Woodbury, and it's good to have you here. My guests this week are Joe Pera and James Wallace, who's better known as Skyway Man. The two work together on Season 2 of Joe's TV show, Pera Talks With You on Adult Swim. Describing what happens on the show doesn't really do it justice. Nothing too out of the ordinary occurs. Characters go on hikes, they stay up late watching videos on the internet, they deal with the passing of loved ones. But it's how the show unfolds, gently, unhurriedly, that makes it such remarkable viewing. It's a very funny show, and it takes its time offering up space and comfort to the viewer, while also skewering its characters lovingly. On The World Only Ends When You Die, Skyway Man also puts his characters through the wringer. It's a psych-folk opera of spaced-out country and sci-fi gospel and blues, laced with mythology and nods to George Van Tassel, legendary ufologist. It's due out this week on Mama Bird Recording Co., and while it certainly grapples with some heavy existential issues, it's also a lot of fun to listen to. I got the two collaborators together on the phone to discuss their work together, mortality and the paranormal. If you enjoy our show, please spread the word, leave a rating or a review, tell your friends. And if you want to take your support a step further, check out Aquarium Drunkard on Patreon. Alright, without further delay, here's my conversation with Joe Pera and Skyway Man. We'll speak more on the other side. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Aquarium Drunkard Transmissions. All right. Well, Joe, James, it's great to have you guys here on Aquarium Drunkard's Transmissions. Thank you so much for joining me.
Good to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Well, congrats on your new projects. The new Skyway Man album is really incredible. And Joe, I read that your forthcoming book, a bathroom book for people not pooping or peeing, but using the bathroom as an escape, is currently the #1 pre-order on Amazon in the love, sex, and marriage (parentheses humor close parentheses) department. So I think that's a fit. You've made it.
I'm excited. I don't know. It's very, very excited for people to read the book, but more about James's album. It's coming out. It's in the process of coming out, right?
It's about 70% released, and it's going to be out on October 23rd in its entirety.
James, a lot of people will sort of release like a single, once a week or, every couple weeks. But your rollout for this has been a lot more involved in that. When did that idea, the sort of pairing of the songs, are they in the order of the release? Have they been released in order of the track list? I mean.
Yep. Pretty straightforward, one song at a time, or a few songs in a cluster. Yeah. When
did that idea? I mean, obviously it's sometimes difficult for people to come up with like a lot of the stuff that would normally be associated with an album release, like live performances and things like that, obviously can't happen. Was the rollout of this something that you started conceiving of, in response to the pandemic, or was it something that you'd been thinking about before?
I think it was something that I had naively expected would happen. Like the deep dive into the virtual realm of releasing it slowly, but fathoming that idea like pre-pandemic is sort of absurd, because there really wouldn't have been any time to prepare everything that way. And so in the back of my mind, I was thinking this would be so cool if it came out as a story, one chapter at a time. And I had just started working with Mama Bird, and we were kind of getting to know each other and figuring out what a realistic release looked like as kind of everything was crumbling around us. And I remember there was a couple of phone calls where, we scheduled a phone call, and I had it in the back of my mind, the possibility of them saying, "Sorry, James, records aren't coming out anymore," or this is just kind of this is tabled, which is a theme I feel like in the process of like the slow process I usually follow to make these records. It's just a slow process. But instead they were they were sad to, we all kind of realized we should postpone as like reasonably possible. But as soon as we set like a far date, I think we felt relieved a little bit when, the only true show date we had on the books around the release, which was sort of getting timed, was the Pickathon Festival, which we were, super excited about. But when they canceled that, it was just clear that all bets were off and we should just slow everything down and imagine things on a wide scale. That's kind of how it came together.
It's a concept album, but was the concept as outlined, in your mind when you started this process of creating the art that like there's these incredible drawings by Kevin. Is it Kevin Hoyman? How's Kevin's last name pronounced?
I'm pretty sure it's Huiman. I really like the idea of it being pronounced Huiman. I don't think I've ever said, "Hey, Kevin Huiman," so I don't know for sure. Kevin, I hope that's okay. And but the concept, I guess, came also somewhat gradually. Working with him kind of committed me to thinking more about the story and unpacking it. Also, Vincent from Mama Bird really sort of encouraged me to, I would sort of hint at it in discussions and talk about how I felt like there was this, chapter-based narrative. And, I think it was when I came to the realization I was going to work closely with Kevin on the art and that I was going to be releasing this slowly with Vincent and the team. I really kind of sat down and unpacked it, which is like a concept. Yeah, it's definitely a concept. And also to unpack something like that feels, again, it kind of goes against, I think, oftentimes what a better artistic nature would assume, which is to sort of keep all of your cards close to the chest and just have an album be an album. And if people want to take it that way or not, it's up to them. And I don't know. I just kind of had a really good time thinking about it as if it were a class project, and it kind of extracted itself that way, sort of. And I'm now I can't really look at it any other way, I guess.
Right. Were you and Kevin discussing this stuff pretty? What was the discussion process like? Would you tell him would you provide him sort of rough script kind of ideas? I mean, obviously, the lettering and stuff, but I'm talking about the visual content of stuff. Did you sort of have a hand in directing that?
No, the dude's kind of like a long lost mystical older brother, I'd say. He came. I was given one of his comics by a friend on a whim, and it sat on my shelf for like a couple of weeks, and then one night I was stoned and I just jumped in and started reading it. And if anybody out there has read one of his longer form comics, it really just, I can speak for myself, it just kind of jumped right into my soul. And there was one section where he had a page full. He does a lot of studies, I would say, where there'll just be a kind of a non sequitur page full of clouds or types of computer connectors, or in this case, it was band names. And he had a whole page full of a little square with a name of a fictional band, and then just a little sense of what that band looked like. And I thought it was so brilliant. And one in particular was a band he called the Desperation Play, and it stuck with me. Probably for like, literal and metaphorical reasons, but I kind of got, I don't know, within a week I was like delivering flowers for Valentine's Day. It's a gig I did in Nashville every year, and I kind of had this like romantic idea for a song about a dude whose favorite band is the Desperation Play, and he just kind of gets like shut down by a girl he really likes, and so that turned into a song which is on the record called Night Walking Alone. And as the time was beginning, I mean, late into the game, I think I already knew I was releasing this record, and I hadn't really thought too much about the art direction. I emailed Kevin. I probably used the contact form on his website, and I got nowhere. But then somebody I knew who knew him gave me his actual email, and I just told him about the song and the band, and I sent him the song, and he responded as like, "Dude, this is a cool song. This is neato. Thanks, man." And I think I wrote in there somewhere like, "Hey, maybe we could collaborate." And he said, "Yeah, let's do it." And yeah, it's he's not the easiest guy to get a hold of, and I say that in my mind to his credit. Personally, I like somewhat how mystical and elusive he can be, and he does things very much on his own terms. But yeah, I somehow the conversation shifted, and I said, "What if you made some artwork for the album?" And that's when I kind of burrowed and thought, well, if he's going to make artwork for the record, and he's a comic artist, I don't want to like force his hand to do a giant, like multifaceted storyline kind of like concept. But wouldn't it be cool if I at least sent him a like 5-page essay about what the record's about? So I sort of burrowed in and wrote a lot of stuff. And there's many things that, there's this this thing that's coming along concurrently with each song called the illuminated manuscripts, and those are like kind of a libretto for each tune. But there's also these outside writings that I've made about the album, which I haven't shared yet, and I may at some point. I probably hold those a little closer, but I shared just like a lot of stuff with him along with the album, and it ended up working out perfectly, I think, for his process, because he just dove in, and he disappeared for sure about 3 weeks, and I thought, oh man, yeah, I don't know if this is gonna work. I mean, I've worked with a lot of wonderful artists in the past, and understand the that like balance, that delicate balance between the more brilliant artists who can understand your vision, also sometimes being unreachable, either by cell phone or by like the winds of the spirit moon waves. So it's just I have a lot of patience in that regard. But I was beginning to wonder if this was going to happen, and then one day he sent me an email with about 30 sketches, and every single page was full of ideas, like little vignettes of moments on the album that were inspired by the writings about each song, but also just directly in relation to the lyrics themselves. I guess he had Googled images of me, and he kind of really nailed this kind of like weathered, bearded, like future version of me, I think. And I mean, I was beside myself, and that was when I knew we were meant to work together.
Yeah, that's incredible. Joe, you worked with an artist a lot on your TV show. Mary Houlihan did the title cards, and she's done a fair amount of art, and some of your earlier stuff was also for Adult Swim was also animated. What's
Yeah.
what's your experience been working with artists like that? Do you usually come to them with a pretty set and sort of like concrete idea of what you want the art to accomplish, or do you try to figure out some sort of way to maybe be a little bit more improvisatory and allow them to kind of do their own thing to some degree?
Well, Mary's excellent painter. She paints kind of I don't know. I say they're somewhat realistic, hand painted images. And first season, we kind of I think we said here's what we're trying to do to her, and like here's the theme of the episode, and it's basically she'll do the title, a main image, and then four little corner pieces for the title card of each episode. And um we kind of go, toss ideas around. And I think first season we kind of left it up to chance and hoped to catch some inspiration. And then we realized that TV deadlines are kind of not great for um having time to figure stuff out or letting your imagination take you. We've got like sometimes a week to edit an episode. James knows, because he's done the music in quite a hurry, and it's kind of like sometimes you just got to get it done. So the second season we kind of had sessions where I'd sit down and figure out exactly what the images should be, and like Mary would kind of match that. I feel bad asking for something so specific because like if she had time she could come up with something probably better and paint it better. But uh I don't know. Sometimes you just have to say like, I don't know. We needed a hockey puck, and she'll paint a hockey puck beautifully, and it'll work great. But there's just not like a ton of time for complete exploration of ideas in a way that I wish that we had time to give her.
Sure. Sure. Do either of you have physical pieces that either something from Kevin or Mary, like physical art that has been created for your projects that you hang on to, or do they have that stuff?
I've got nothing yet. I've never met Kevin. I've everything. Yeah, even from the beginning of our conversations was kind of just before stuff was starting to turn. So yeah, I hope. I mean, my dream is to go and find him in New York and have a beer and like look over like and touch some of these like sketches he scanned and sent to me. But no, I've never seen one in person.
Yeah, Mary gives last season, the first season, and before she would give us the hand painted things that she painted and scanned, and they're beautiful. I love knowing that I have a couple. I put all like the images of Christmas trees I made. I've got framed, and I appreciate it. But I think last season we didn't ask, and I think she sold a lot of the original paintings online, and I'm glad that she could make a little extra money on the side from doing that. Yeah, so I think like, I mean, they're only like a few inches by a few inches because they're painted and then scanned. But after that, I don't know. They're fun. They're fun to own, and I'm glad that other people get to have them too.
You already alluded to it, but you guys worked together on the last season of the show. James, were you already working on this album while you were working on season 2 of the TV show, or what was sort of the timeline?
I had probably just finished the album. Well, there's always little things to like button up, but for the most part, the album had been done right around when this started, which was good because I needed to put my full attention on the TV show, not have any other projects at the time.
How did you guys meet, Joe? What made you reach out to James?
I was somebody posted on Instagram James's album. Billy Wayne Davis is a comedian, and I think he's from Nashville too, right, James?
Yeah, he is from Nashville. We've never met, but I definitely know of him.
No, I've
Mailed him a
never.
hat once.
Yeah, so he just posted on Instagram, check out this album, and I was in the middle. I was taking a research trip to Michigan the first season, and I was driving. I think it was uh, late winter, and I just put on James's album and was completely blown away. And I don't know. I guess even from the first season, though, we didn't work on that together. I just had a lot of associated a lot of the stuff that I saw in Michigan and in the museums and the town, and I was just listening to his album the entire time, and it kind of in my head, and while I was writing, I was thinking about it, and I guess tonally, it was perfect. So then when James played the show in Brooklyn, I think in between the two seasons, I went and said hello.
James, were you already familiar with the show, or did you need to sit down and watch the first season?
I think I watched the first episode that night when I got back to my aunt's apartment in the Upper East Side. Oh, sorry, she lives on the Upper West Side. She would kill me if she listened to this and heard me say that. She's been holding it down there since like '79.
Yeah, we try to have a no upsetting aunts policy on this podcast, so I appreciate the correction. Yeah,
totally. And my aunt is by and large my biggest fan, perhaps next to my mom.
That's great.
Yeah, no, I sensed it, but I had not heard of it, and that's by and large due to just I've been kind of in a TV void for a lot of the last few years. I'm turning around. Obviously, the pandemic helped, but
yeah, I think we've all watched a lot more TV in 2020 than maybe we
for sure
normally would have. What did you think of that first episode?
It it felt what's that line in this is kind of silly. There's that movie, the Kids in the Hall movie, Brain Candy, when the woman takes the happy pill for the first time and they're trying to ask her how it makes her feel, and she just stares off into space and says, "It feels like God is rubbing my tummy." And I guess, I mean, to a degree, it really did send me right off into a lovely sleep that night. So I would probably put it in that category.
Yeah, Joe, we actually we've spoke once before, and we talked about how you don't mind if people fall asleep to your show. Did going into the season 2 and working with James, what kind of conversations did you guys have about the tone of the music? Because it is very gentle and lulling, and I could see myself falling asleep to the soundtrack stuff from season 2. Maybe not the new album so much. Not that it's not lovely, but it's a little bit more it's more awake, I guess. But what kind of discussions did you guys have about what you wanted the music to accomplish in season 2?
I think, the main part of the music is, and the whole show is, we try and keep everything fairly simple, and I don't know. It's hard to. It kind of sucks because sometimes it's just what feels right, and it's hard. I guess we taught. I guess. I'm sorry, I'm not thinking that clearly at this time of night. But it was. I think we try and keep everything simple. There are a lot of like real simple melodies, kind of. We like almost old church hymns that we use as reference. Like I remember James's melody for the sugar loaf, and in episode 2, it was just so uh, straightforward that it was almost, I don't know I don't know if you'd say it the same, but it was almost like too simple for. I felt almost insulting asking James to like make something that simple with so few notes, but it just worked and kind of amplified the humor. Um, but I guess there is kind of like almost like a hymn element to it where it's very simple and I don't know. James uses a lot of church music uh, in his work too, though. So that was kind of fun to find out.
Yeah, there's
Especially,
a lot of gospel references on the new record, and yeah, I definitely I hear what you're talking about. Was that what kind of James? I'm gonna sound I might sound a little bit goofy here, but the gospel that you reference on your stuff is maybe a slightly different style than maybe what you would reference in the Joe Pera stuff. Is that a fair way to put it?
Yeah, in a way. I mean, there's still a there's a distillation that is happening on like a constant distillation that I think is like part of the power of all gospel music when it really hits. And I can definitely I definitely found myself praying to the God of simplicity working on this stuff.
Yeah.
And I don't I remember most of the feedback I felt was it always, I mean, it was always delivered really politely and started with "this is great," and then usually, can you make it softer? Can you put fewer notes? Can you remove the trill?
Yeah.
Can you make it less comedic? and those were like, fortunately, they were really, they're like, it felt like the words of a mentor in a lot of ways, like a kind of a spirit guide that can help me. I mean, I enjoyed it, and it was also good too, Joe. I don't know. We might have talked about this some at the rap party, but Ryan Dan, the other composer on the show, who, if you're not familiar with his work, is really, really great. And if it wasn't for him, I don't know if I could have pulled it off or felt as comfortable doing it, because he sort of really was always there for me to call and say, hey, if Joe says he wants it softer, or if Joe says he wants it less comedic, maybe just try try this or this. And it wasn't that like it's not that I think he needed to translate Joe's vision, but if nothing else, he was like, you don't have to worry if you don't totally get it. You just keep doing it. it's very like the whole try not try Taoist approach. And I mean, there's a lot of space on this TV show to approach that in yourself, and I appreciated it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I told you. I was very uncomfortable giving notes a lot of the time because I don't know. There are pieces in the show that sometimes it's like just it's so it felt underneath like James, a musician like James, would be like, we just need something very simple here, and it has to do this exact thing, and to just kind of ask for something so specific and simple, but it needed to be very particular to get the comedy right. I hated asking for that. Like, I think, but my favorite was when you did the drive to Milwaukee and the jazz on the radio, and it was just like I could ask for something that's understated, something for the radio, and then James could go and come back with whatever he was inspired by at the time, and do his own searching and try and find a piece. I loved when it was open ended like that. I felt, but then there are some like tight corners, like just like this. I think the second episode, it's like just we need a very simple chord progressions, and it needs to kind of, the main thing is that it's at a walking pace and amplifies this walking humor and matches the speed uh, of the way that I'm talking. And like, I felt very uncomfortable, James, because I know everything that you do musically. I just felt like, to ask you to do stuff like that, I felt bad.
Well, it turned out really well because I mean, it's a really unique tone, right? And I mean, it's a really specific tone that I think is the music accentuates that sort of. I'm trying to. It's been hard to put. People bring up things like Mister Rogers or Fishing with John, maybe. But there is this sort of like quiet intensity in a weird way where the fact that not okay, so James, talk a little bit about that, because I think that is really one of the keys to what makes the show tick, right? Is that when you're watching a screen where things are happening very slowly, it's so different than what we're used to almost all the time. You know what I mean? Like, we're constantly moving at a much, much higher speed, just in pretty much everything I can think of, So it really does feel to me like, a very specific mood, and I imagine that must have been fun to work in, James, once you started to kind of get the feel.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely had to get the feel. It took a bit of it started. I definitely started probably attempting things, as you said, much faster, and trying to maximize whatever emotional, assuming that my role as creating music would be to just like turn up the knob on the situation of the scene. And I learned early on, I think it was the running the bases scene in the second episode, where my first inclination when I saw it was and now I can't think of the song, but I went from a referential point of wanting to have that sort of, that understated victorious like moment in the romantic comedy where things really begin to come together. And I mean, of course, that's the first place I wanted to write something with. And it felt so fun to me. Granted, I mean, for all I know, I might have like gone into the shed that day and watched the scene and may have been a little stoned and wanted to just like get real into it. I think it was a great lesson in learning how there's like an undercurrent of power that you can contain in comedy, and even in just there's a sense of genuineness that can be maintained if you don't shoot past the mark and go for just like maximizing either a comedic sense that maybe relates to something kind of like mixed in with irony, or just a feeling of just like maximizing the tone. It's not always the move. And by kind of finding just a way to get a feeling across that seems in accordance with this, like there, at no point should the music feel like it's becoming a parody, or it makes the sense of the scene a parody, and music can definitely do that. And I found a new path in creation while working on this show, where I knew that I had to kind of find the way to understate it and get in line with the tone. And that was fun.
It was the baseball scene is almost like the inverse of the opening. Something was so kind of ridiculous was happening that it almost, you had to kind of do a little bit less and just have the organ tones play. But then, because like, and then it was like the inverse at the beginning when we were just showing that just a cone of sugar into a shot of me walking towards the camera, and uh, that's James's melody was very it was very rhythmic to match the walking, but also very kind of sweet in a way. It was just a nice, simple melody. Bum 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 bum. Sorry, I shouldn't start singing, but it was like a very sweet song. So that when I came on screen and said something real stupid, it kind of, or it wasn't stupid, but I forget. It was just something about like walking or hiking, and when I said the kind of silly line that this is the sweetness of James's intro played against that, and it was like the music set the tone for such a silly thing to be said. And it was kind of the inverse with the baseball scene, and that they're kind of balancing each other out
Right.
in a way.
That kind of balance is really important to, well, I think actually to both of these projects. Something that I thought about a lot listening to the new record is the way, I think "Don't Feel Bad About Being Alive" is maybe my favorite track right now. And I don't know, yeah,
I'm glad because that song took the most physical effort to create. So whenever that happens, when that correlates to somebody's favorite, it's nice. Sorry, go ahead.
no. Well, I was thinking about the album, and I was thinking about the show, and I think that something that they share is a way in which there is a kind of optimism to both of these things, or there is a kind of sweetness, or a kind of you know there's a kindness that you can hear on both of these projects. But I think what you mentioned earlier about not sort of missing the mark, going a little too far, amping things up a little bit, that's not what either of these things do. There's a lot of sort of restraint. And I think that one of the reasons why it's so hard to get optimism into art is because it just feels phony so often. So I wondered if you guys could talk a little bit about how you manage to get a sense of, peacefulness or optimism, or, that kind of kind quality into what you're doing without just being sugary, or, saccharine, or kind of like too much to the point where it feels kind of fake.
Um, it's hard. I guess I'll just start by saying that, like, one of the reasons that I thought James would be perfect to compose was uh, s- "Seen by a Mighty Eye." Just the way that the album or the song "Wire" starts, and I just had such an easy time imagining the opening of the second season to that song just by the first few chords. They were so simple, and they did kind of, like you mentioned, had that quiet intensity. And it was there's so much in those few chords that I thought that was what aligned it with the show so much. And I don't know, it was very, I don't know, they're very hopeful in a way, even if uh, I'm not answering your question that well, but I'm just kind of trying to connect that. The um, I don't know. I don't know where I was going with that. It was just there's something in those chords that I think is in this show. It's kind of a little bit of a yearning almost, and beginning of a story. And I think that's, I don't know. I thought that those chords kind of captured the, a lot of the things that I wanted to put into the show alone. Not to mention the rest of the song and everything else, but I just thought they spoke a lot about uh, a lot of stuff was contained in just those chords, and then where the rest of the song went. And I don't know. And yeah, and it was just they're not, it was just very straightforward at the same time. Uh, I guess that's why that song and album really spoke to me. Mm.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, sorry. Oh, also
No,
the
it's
way it grows, and um, uh, mm, sorry,
Yeah, no
dude.
worries. James, do you when it comes to that idea of optimism, this record obviously it's telling this story of sort of a, I don't know, like a journey into the underworld and all this stuff. But there's this sense in which that is presented less. There are certainly the sort of more the darker side of things, but there's a lot of balance on this record, and there's a lot of sort of balance towards overall kind of managing to find some sort of feeling of peace, I think. So, is that, what was your sort of with this album? Were you thinking in terms of trying to capture something about your own journey, and maybe try to get some of whatever kind of peace or comfort you have found, into this record specifically?
um yeah, I mean there's some of making this music and assembling it in the way that I did is for a way to sort of find my own understanding in things, because I don't always understand the individual pieces of the music and where things are going, and then when it all finally comes together, I take an extra sigh of relief, feeling that I get what it is that I am trying to say, and that is good for my mental health. And yeah, but as soon as I zoom into anything, it's really hard. Thinking about things, I feel you could generally say that if the message I'm stating lyrically is positive, then the music is maybe leaning dark. And then if the music is darker, the or if the music is sounding positive, then my message might sound a little darker or lost, more like hopeless, I guess.
The kind of Beach Boys juxtaposition kind of feel.
I guess so.
Where,
It's only, and that may just be from a way that I can personally justify how much or too much of an emotion I want to, like, that I'm feeling or that I feel needs to be at odds with itself. Because there's that, what really gets me interested in things is when I can find tension that I didn't know was there in listening to something. Like, listen to something that's at first seems innocuous, and then I discover something about the music, and suddenly I find all this tension within it, and that's super exciting to me. It feels like you found like a new color or something. And I try to kind of, I'm always probably trying to do that with whatever I decide is complete. But yeah, I mean, I need to write generally optimistic music for myself, and it's somehow along the way I found writing. It's not really about a post-apocalyptic world so much as just it's like a mixed truthed message from the future is kind of what I'm always trying to send back, kind of like a broadcast that isn't necessarily, it's sort of an allegory, but it is worth considering. I mean, trying to like get that type of attention, trying to force someone to pay attention to a message from the future that is also possibly untrue, is like
right.
a lot of what I think gets me interested in writing new songs. Yeah.
The sort of science fictional or mystical, elements that shade this album and certainly shade the art. Does employing that sort of thematic lens, where you can sort of make something fantastical, does that allow you, in terms of your writing, to explore things that maybe, I mean, the beautiful thing about science fiction, right, is that it's all about, what if or as if, and I wonder if having that as a sort of setup to where you can create whatever conditions you need for the scene, you know, allows you easier access to what you're trying to write about.
Yeah. I mean, I like starting. It's easier for me to, you know, walk out into the world and take the space I need to like work on a song and finish it if I'm thinking of it in the realm of fantasy a little bit. Just, I don't know if that's just because it separates me from my like getting too close to myself and my own neuroses. But when I found that, I mean, I have had a few experiences in life that sort of shifted me towards wanting to write more about that stuff. You know, I had this experience like a little over a decade ago where I found a box of letters that were really, you know, super far out and led me on like kind of a weird mission to find the people who were writing to each other.
Where did you find those letters?
It was in Boone, North Carolina, like around the corner from my old apartment when I was going to school at Appalachian State. It's like a abandoned motorcycle shop, and my friend and I broke into it, and we're just kind of just like cruising around. And I found this is a. I'll just caveat: this is not necessarily a story for this time.
Sure.
If I'm down to do it anytime you want to, but it's a big boy.
That's fine. That's fine. We can come. We'll do a follow up.
Yeah, I mean it definitely as an eternal, like as somebody who's always been fascinated by space, stars, and you know, it's also, you know, loves science fiction cursorily and wants to believe, but as an eternal skeptic, like I take a lot of I'm a hopeless skeptic, I guess, in a lot of ways, but I also can't turn away from anything, and in that regard, I really let this sort of path take me by, you know, like grab me by the collar, and I sort of let it lead me, and that opened me up in a lot of ways to writing about anything. It felt like it gave me permission to you know, write about the like more either absurd or uncanny circumstances, or like commit to the concept of a character as Skyway Man speaking in some sort of context, you know. It just sort of helps lead me along, and yeah, you know, just like a tiny subtext of channeled aliens as well. Always there.
Well, yeah. So you cite ufologist George Van Tassel on I mean, there's a sample, and you make reference to him on "Seen Coming from a Mighty Eye" as well, I think, right? The giant rock.
Yeah, I actually make reference to him on every album, and and it's by accident on the first before I released the Skyway Man record, I put out a vinyl record as James Wallace and the Naked Light, which was just a sort of different version of Skyway Man, and I accidentally put, or like unwittingly put a picture of Giant Rock on the cover of the record just because I really liked it, and it's a drawn picture, and then several years later, I was in Joshua Tree and was just looking up stuff to do, and I came across somebody mentioning Landers and Giant Rock, and I happened to be with the right group of pals, and we just put down our burritos and went straight to it because we found it, and you know, subsequently checked out the Integratron, and it all felt like a weird dream because I was looking at this thing that I had put on my album, and they were talking about a lot of the ideas that George Van Tassel talked about, and his brand of ufology is really similar to the writings that were found in the letters that I discovered in that motorcycle shop. So there's just a lot of shit that kind of came together in that moment. And I'm not an expert on George Van Tassel. I've read a handful of writings about him, and I know that just before earlier today, I discovered there's a podcast called the Giant Rock Podcast. So I'm probably going to go down that rabbit hole and get a little more familiar. But I've listened to some of his. I mean, I listened to a lot of his, probably several hours of his orations, coming up with some sound bites that I really thought felt poignant to the record. And
yeah, that's my favorite way to engage with the stuff, is to hear him talk. That's when it sort of feels the most comprehensible for me, you know?
Yeah, and you're in UFO land yourself. Where in Arizona are you?
I'm in Phoenix. I'm in Phoenix, but
Phoenix.
It only I mean, obviously we're home of one of the maybe the widest reported UFO sighting ever. You know, the Phoenix Lights in '97. But Joe, do you go down that rabbit hole? Are you a UFO guy?
UFO, no, not too much.
Be honest.
I was thinking you're going to pull a Fargo and there's going to be a UFO in season 3 of Joe Pera or whatever.
No, the reason, the real reason James and I work together is because we both seen lights. But I don't know. I've been reading a lot of science fiction too. I was gonna say, and lately especially, because it's nice to imagine us surviving into the future.
Yeah.
And reading about that. Oh wow, we make it past this point, and that's good. It's good enough to. I don't know. That's why I've enjoyed it lately a lot, and thinking about the future and stuff. It is hopeful. I guess it is all science fiction, a little bit hopeful that we make it past the current day.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true in a weird way. Like, any future is, maybe better than no future. So, I mean, yeah, even the dystopian stuff, it's still a reminder that people will be alive, and doing, hopefully, things of note.
Yeah. Yeah, if, I don't know, Earth gets blown up in the year 2500, at least that's not 2025.
Right. James, when it comes to stuff like, obviously, you referenced yourself as sort of a skeptic. Does stuff like, there are obviously people who don't think that George Van Tassel, they don't view him necessarily as as an outsider sort of artist or, creative thinker. A lot of people think like this was a guy who really got, direct messages from aliens. So does sort of the general UFO culture to you, does a lot of that come from, do you sort of view it almost in the same lens as you do view a lot of like science fiction stuff? Or, it's funny because science fiction and religion are these two sort of things that sort of factor in on your record. And I think that they do start to blur back and forth every now and then, especially in something like the field of ufology.
Yeah, well, the most captivating part of all of it to me is the aesthetics, and that is not removed from how I think that every fantastical, imaginable UFO story or alien abduction story, channeling being story, it all ties into some, a lot of that canon, especially the images we know of in relation to like the paradigm of aliens and UFOs. They're very much 20th and 21st century. And I think it has a lot to do with just the lost American colonist seeking spiritualism. That got really heavy, but like that's kind of there's just a lot of that I think like packed into ufology and stuff like that. And also, but I don't know if it's totally. I know that the first image of the UFO and the collective consciousness of the UFO happens a lot, and there may be something to that. There may be some explanation that's stranger than anything, even a skeptic could come up with.
Sure. Sure.
And I love that it exists. It's one of my more favorite aspects of American culture. I love that it's and I know it's world culture as well. It's just that I like the way that it manifests as like as a fiction, as a ideology. Maybe also because it's mostly benign. It's not always the case. I mean, there's plenty of death cults, and I mean, anytime there's like a dude with too much power, he has to figure out how to like wrap things up for his cult. And that's like, it's a whole nother thing. And usually it has to do with aliens somehow, and it's dark. But yeah, I don't know. I guess that kind of sums it up.
No, so yeah, I mean, absolutely. So anti-death cult, but kind of generally pro-UFOs makes. I mean, I think it's a fair pro-UFO culture at least. Something that struck me that's really a big theme about both of these projects also is the aspect of mortality and sort of observing mortality. So I guess what I'm saying is I'd like to talk a little bit about death. And I think that in 2020, there is every reason in the world for us to have really frank and honest and open conversations about death. And yet it still seems to elude most people. I don't think we know how to conceive of the kind of death that we've seen in 2020 I don't think we know how to really kind of contextualize it. But I wanted to talk a little bit about mortality, and James, this record obviously deals with that. And Joe, your show takes a kind of an unexpected turn in a way with the second season, where 1 minute it is a really funny setup about the movie Rat Race, and then the next minute it's a really affecting and moving moment, where your character faces a really momentous loss. So I wanted to talk a little bit about how, maybe we could start with you, Joe. That's kind of a bold move. What kind of conversations did you have with the other writers about how you were going to thread that sort of needle in terms of shifting the show into unexpected territory?
Well, I guess everybody, or almost everybody in the writer's room had lost somebody. I lost my grandmother at the beginning of season 1 as we were finishing the writing process, and I just didn't really have. I was so overwhelmed by everything we had to do. I didn't really have time to process it, or I didn't. And but also another writer lost his mother. Another writer lost her father. One other one lost their friend during the season 1, and I just thought that it would be a worthwhile thing to dig into. And I guess yeah, and it just kind of started from there. And I know we started the episode in which she passes. She starts from, we're doing like a fake rat race. I don't want to give. No, that's okay. It's been out for a while, but yeah, we're doing like a fake rat race after the character sees the movie Rat Race, and then his grandmother dies. I guess I don't know. It kind of.
You just.
I'm trying to.
I mean,
think
I think that it was you. What you accomplished with it was this really tender and human thing. So I mean, it worked totally.
I guess it's just what I don't know when people die suddenly, you get caught in. I don't know. There are plenty of kind of ridiculous deaths, and also deaths that happen suddenly. There are things that happen that make you wonder why everything else seems so frivolous and silly that you were going about doing before. That I guess it's just kind of exaggerated it. and I think it's, I don't, maybe with the comment, but the idea that he was doing a rat race seemed like it almost increased the amount of guilt in my head. I guess maybe sometimes, like, I don't know, maybe it's linked in the fact that I felt ridiculous making a comedy show or continuing making a comedy show after my grandmother's death and during everything else that's going on right now. I think it might be a reflection on how silly it feels to do comedy and pick it back up. And I don't know. We just wanted to kind of after the death, just depict it realistically and some of those things and the interactions that happen. And then I don't know. Sorry, it was like a year ago I wrote it. I can't remember the specific decisions, but
I mean, did you have any doubt in your? Did you have any doubt, like, I don't know if we should attempt this with this show, or I mean, I imagine that it's easy to have that doubt, but
yeah, sure. I mean, like, I knew that if we didn't do it properly, it was going to come off looking ridiculous in the attempt, and it would undermine everything. And so I just treated it kind of like as a real tribute to my grandmother. The obituary that was in the episode was about her, and just I don't know, the difficulty of having to do something like that at the time was something people have reached out and said that it helped that episode, and has helped them in some circumstances write an obituary, and other people just said that they've lost somebody close to them and it helped get through it, and just appreciation of a life.
I just really liked how and it almost felt like the function of the season was shown, the function of the style of either entertainment or art, whatever you want to call it, as was shown in those two episodes, because I think it really held space. It's almost as though not that nothing comedic happened in the following episode, but it was, you allowed, I think, anyone who really gets the show and watches it, when watching that next episode, was, at least me, just very relieved to not sense that there was this pacing need to find when the next, like, instance of comedy was going to be, but it really actually let you just exist quietly inside of what everyone was experiencing, but not in a dramatic, it's like hard to articulate, but I just wanted to mention that I really, really enjoyed the patience of that.
Thanks. I think now I'm remembering a little bit, I think it was just about, like, just that feeling of being in the house. I don't know, after the funeral mass is over, after all the everybody's given their condolences, and you're just kind of left with that quiet and what you do with it, and that just being fatigued and also having chores to do and continue, and trying to take those first steps to restarting your life without somebody, and just those quiet moments where you just are kind of existing, and yeah, that just, you feel that big emptiness. I think that's, at least in the obituary episode, that's what we were trying to capture the tone of. I don't think there's any music in that one, right, James?
Yeah, no, that was a week off for sure. There's nothing.
Yeah.
mortality is kind of a tricky thing. James, on The World Only Ends When You Die, your character suffers a sort of near-death experience. Have you ever experienced anything like that yourself, and did that inform the way you worked on this album?
Well, I mean, Yeah, there's an instance that like I can point to. I don't know if it. I mean, I don't know if it's like a direct inspiration. Maybe I kind of call back to it because when I think about the inspiration from said near-death experience, I think of the first vinyl I released as James Wallace and the Naked Light, which I recorded very quickly and released shortly after a bike accident that I had. And I also always feel like maybe there's it's some kind of catalyst I go back to, but it wasn't that dramatic, I think, as a story. I was like riding my bike in Nashville after this really just like punishing tour in my van again with like 4 friends where we booked a really useless is a bad term, but we booked a long like tour up to Canada and over to New York and playing each other's songs. Everything you could imagine goes wrong and we fight a lot, but we also love each other and it's hot and we're in a van again. And then I get back and like a couple days later, I'm riding my bike to, I think I was going to go play tambourine with someone at the Basement, which is a venue in Nashville. And, a woman pulled out in front of me as I was going down a hill and I hit the car. I ruptured my spleen, but I didn't really hurt anything else. And I mean, that is bad and it sounds bad.
Yeah, that sounds awful.
It is bad. And there was also a really comedic moment with the doctor where it's kind of like I don't know. I mean, my memory is foggy from that time period. I didn't actually have a concussion, but still my memory, like the adrenaline memory is foggy. He kind of reminded me of like a Garth Marenghi type doctor. And he, I got the CAT scan and I was lying in this room, the hospital room, and I was waiting on the results and he came in and he just said, "Got your spleen." And I said, what do you mean got your spleen? And he goes, "It got your spleen."
The car?
And yeah, the car, I guess. But he didn't say the car. He just said it. And so then I asked him, what does that mean? In the sense that I wanted to know what my future was going to look like.
Right.
And he licked his index finger and drew the line on my chest where they were going to cut me open.
Oh no.
and was like, "Well, we're going to make an incision right here." And I was like, that's useless information. I really only want to know what's going to happen afterwards. And he made it seem as though everything was going to be fine and my future would be identical except for this simple incision that they'd have to make. And I didn't believe him. And then he left the room and came back and said, "Oh, wow, we don't have an OR team here, so we're going to send you to another hospital ASAP." And I said, "Okay." And as I was getting wheeled away, I've told the story many times and it sounds more cartoonish each time. So I'm always at odds with myself to know if it's true. But when I was getting wheeled away, he yelled out, "Oh yeah, when you get," we was going to Vanderbilt. "When you get to Vanderbilt, they might not cut out your spleen." And I said, "Wow. Okay." And turns out when I got to Vanderbilt, they didn't cut out my spleen. They just watched me for 3 days and things went back to normal and I was okay. So yeah, I'm grateful. I don't know if I'd call that a near-death experience, but it was like a wake-up call. The name of that tour, by the way, we named that tour The Summer of Trouble. And
yeah,
all kinds of things. When one of my
prophetic
friends learned that his sweetheart was actually a sociopath and had been stealing money from him. And we also, we booked shows through Yelp, if that is even a fathomable thing. And anyways, we got through it, and I never categorically name any project with a prophetically dark name. That's like a rule. I don't do that anymore.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that sounds like what you just described sounds like that's an entire album, like another concept album. You know what I mean? Like the intensity of the story. But when you have a doctor licking his finger, which I don't like that part. But
Hated that part.
yeah, that was not cool. But when you are faced with the it doesn't matter, even how routine the surgery is. Anytime you're faced with this situation where your life is definitely not, in your hands, that definitely inspires a line of thinking. And I wonder if this record feel sort of tied to even just the, because we can't understand what death is entirely. We know what happens, and we know that it will happen, but this album sort of spins a yarn out from that knowledge. What inspired you to kind of go down that path?
I guess it kind of feels similar to the thing that Joe said earlier, where once you're obsessing over an idea or a song or lyrics or melody, etc., you hold a whole lot in your mind, and it's intense, and it's like, I'm not trying to sound like tortured or anything, but it can be a little overwhelming, even if you're just considering the logistics required to like get them out with a team of people in a studio in a set amount of time. But it's just that once it's out, it feels totally different than it did when it was on the front end.
Right.
And you can almost make up a new story for what it is that you made. And then that can be the story that I would say is the inspiration. And I also know that that's not totally genuine. So I have reservation on the song Muddy Water. I was driving home. I was riding my bike along the Greenway in Nashville late at night, kind of, not totally unsketchy circumstance, but I'd gotten free tickets to see the Rolling Stones play at Titan Stadium. So I was like I was vibing hard, leaving that concert on my bike, thinking of like all the synchronicities of like, how cool is it that I can ride my bike home from a stadium from seeing the Rolling Stones. I'm a little tipsy and I don't even have a light on this bike, but the moon is up and I can see, and I'm along the river, and the river is really far out to me right now. And I got home and immediately just felt like I had permission to sing about such mundane things as muddy water and a river. And that's like kind of the only reason that song exists. And you kind of unpack it from there.
Right.
That's a lot of songs are similar to that.
Where the meaning becomes sort of extrapolated or expands, after it's actually, created. I guess that's what all art is. But it's interesting that even for you as the creator, it's like your work has something to teach you after you're sort of done with it.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And it's a lot. That's a big, weird part of why I continue to pursue this very bizarre enterprise. It's like the weird after effects that happen when you're done and you can see what you've created, and it like shows you something. It's all interesting.
Well, guys, I appreciate you taking the time to talk. Before I let you go, I did want to ask what you guys have been listening to lately, because I think that could be interesting for people to hear. What have you been listening to lately, Joe?
The Skyway Man album.
There you go.
But also the Bill Callahan's new stuff that's been coming out, and also I kind of a few weeks ago I went through a re-listen of Jay Retard.
Oh yeah,
and I really enjoyed that.
What a drag that he's gone. He should have made 1,000 more albums.
Definitely. I was just gonna say how nice the final track on the new Skyway album is. Especially, I was thinking as we were talking later about, I don't know, kind of maintaining a little bit of hopefulness. It's a very nice track for that, and I think it's not like I don't know. How would you I should let James describe it, but it's just a kind of a nice thing to hear these times, and hopeful, even though it's kind of a slow song.
I mean, the song itself is brother and sister WB great. Like that is the song, and as far as I'm concerned, the only song that exists. And what I did was just hang a like someone who learned it off of an AM radio broadcast in the future take on it, sort of.
Wow.
And so I mean, when it comes to that song, I would say anyone who encounters it and enjoys it, just return to the original source and listen to that one, and just let that take you. And but yeah, I mean, I know I like that. It feels, even that recording feels really hopeful to me in a way that I needed, and I really wanted to make sure it did. So I'm real grateful you said that.
Yeah, and I love the idea of somebody sort of a future person sort of like carrying that song forward after having, maybe heard it, Yeah, that it is really beautiful. How about you, James? What have you been spinning lately to keep from going crazy?
Well, that new floating action Michael Now song that they just put out is pretty special.
Yeah.
And I mean, it all feels like last night I guess it was like a post debate trying to like cook dinner and just like put myself in a really good mood, like the day after, just a day that I feel like everyone slept kind of weird.
Yeah,
most people. And then, and I put on my friend Big Kitty's record. He has this album it's like a radio show called A Legend in the Field of Entertainment, and it's it's like just transports you to another place, and it's all I needed while I was cooking. And beyond that, I have not been listening to a lot of music. But I still love it. It's a good type of art.
I would say that that's probably pretty crucial to what you do. So I'm glad that you're okay with the concept of music. You might be in trouble if you weren't.
I'm still a huge fan. Okay.
Well, the new record is really fantastic, and the work that you guys did on the second season of Pera Talks With You is also really fantastic, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to talk about this stuff with me.
Thanks, Jason, of course.
Thanks so much. Yeah, this was a blast.
Joe Pera and Skyway Man. Go get The World Only Ends When You Die, Friday, October 23rd, wherever you get music. And do yourself a favor and check out all the episodes of Pera Talks With You. There are 2 great seasons, and you can catch them all via Adult Swim. I'll be back next week with a brand new episode, but if you can't wait until then, head over to Aquarium Drunkard and check out our podcast archives, featuring conversations with Tim Heidecker, Jason Mantzoukas, Jeff Parker, Killian Welch, Michael Rutter of Noi, and many more. Speak soon. Take it easy until then.